What if Robb Stark tried to ally with Stannis, not Renly? Let's explore the depths of it in the video. If this video gets 2,500 likes, we'll make a part 2.
Why shouldn't we rule ourselves again? It was the dragons we bowed to, and now the dragons are dead. There sits the only king I mean to bend my knee to. The King of the North!
Robb watches as Greatjon kneels before him, lying his sword at his feet. Before he can even comprehend what's happening, Lord Karstark joins him, followed by Maege Mormont and others. Northmen and Riverlords all begin to shout for the King in the North. The enormity of this moment is not lost on him. Those words haven't been uttered in almost 3 centuries, and to declare it now threatens to cross a line that there is no coming back from. Slowly, Robb rises to his feet and gestures for them to quiet down.
My lords, the Greatjon's zeal is appreciated as always, but I was given sage wisdom recently that Tywin Lannister is not a foe to trifle with. We do not need bravery or bluster, but cool logic. Are we prepared to take this action?
We note to the dragons, but they are all gone.
Aye, but Stannis and Renly are fighting for the throne. If we declare independence, we will be making foes of them too. And I'd rather not face Lord Stannis.
Stannis squats on Dragonstone, hiding without an army. What do we have to fear?
Only turning into oath-breakers. My father died defending Lord Stannis' claim. If we were to abandon that claim now, we would be betraying his memory.
His words have the intended effect as the cheering dies out completely. Instead, the lords quiet down and look at the ground. Robb takes this as leave to continue.
Stannis has done me no wrong, and I can see no cause to abandon him now. So I say, let us join our forces with him, and let us take the capital. We could not save my father. We can at least ensure the rightful king sits on the Iron Throne.
Though shamed a moment before, the lords now leap to their feet and raise their swords into the air, vowing to fight for the one true king. Ravens are soon sent out to Dragonstone, proclaiming Winterfell and Riverrun's loyalty to Stannis. Welcome news to the king in a desperate search for allies. Despite his claim to the throne, few lords flock to his side. Even Davos's efforts to raise the Stormlands ends poorly, as while some of the lords are open to supporting him, especially with his allies up north. The problem is, he is too late. Renly has already crowned himself and gained the support of the Reach, making it difficult for them to openly back him. This leaves him with no reinforcements south, putting Stannis in a difficult position. Though he wishes to march to King's Landing immediately, they are in no position to do so, as most of Robb's army is still in the Riverlands, with Tywin preventing them from committing completely to an offensive. Instead, Stannis decides to sail to the Riverlands and add his strength to Robb's. But with Tywin squatting in Harrenhal, this proves more difficult than it looks, as the largest portion of Maidenpool is behind enemy lines. The Lion of the West realizes this, and sends a contingent of men south to Maidenpool to garrison the town and prevent Stannis from landing uncontested. This leaves Stannis with limited options as to where he can attack. As he looks over the painted table, his brow furrows at the considerations. Most of the eastern coast of the Riverlands is controlled by Tywin. This means that a large landing will be contested, and Stannis simply doesn't have the army to contest him. As he gathers his war council, different voices call for different actions.
Your Grace, if I may suggest, though my fellow Reachmen have declared for Renly, that was before your alliance. Sail south and confront them directly. Your presence may cause some lords to reconsider. I am certain I can convince my brother to cross his banners.
Begging your pardon, but this is madness. What would they fear from our arrival? No, the young wolf has won his battles through boldness. Let it not be said a vassal was greater than a king. Sail to Maidenpool and crush the garrison there. That should put the fear of the stag in the lion.
Your Grace, if I may, I think you are neglecting the elephant in the room, or should I say, the crab in the room. Cracklaw Point may have a suitable landing. Though it is no major port, the Lannisters have no presence there, and its lords have declared for no king. We may perhaps raise an army there.
The Cracklaws?
Sir Davos, those people are half mad and distrustful of outsiders. Should we land our forces there, we shall be slaughtered.
And lawless, too. The lands of that region belong to House Kaladgar, but they have refused to pay their taxes. Sometimes they send my collectors back in pieces.
Claims of little merit. Queen Visenya had guaranteed that they only answer to the law. Sir Davos, I am the rightful king. Would you have me beg for my crown?
Not beg, your grace. Rule.
It is as you say. You are their sovereign. So you show yourself to them. Listen to their disputes and ask for their aid. Show them that they are not beneath your notice, as you did to me. Then you shall have their swords.
Is that what you suggest, Onion Knight? Haggle with the savages and listen to their grumbling.
Enough. I shall consider all your proposals.
With that dismissal, the lords all bow and depart, but soon orders are sent out. Sir Godry and Sir Richard Hope are to land a small force on the mainland consisting of cavalry and sellswords. Their job is to gather houses from the Crownlands and raid those who have sworn allegiance to House Lannister. Stannis then sends his sellsails to raid Duskendale. Soon enough, a small fleet of fishing skiffs and light galleys led by Davos's oldest sons land on the shores, depositing nearly 1,000 cavalry and sellswords. These rush through the lush plains of the Crownlands, seizing loot, capturing light castles, and persuading some lesser lords to strike at them. Meanwhile, Salador Sand strikes at Duskendale, blockading it and taxing incoming ships, as well as burning those already at the harbor. Although small, these attacks are close enough to King's Landing to cause some panic within the court. They see these as shaping operations for Stannis to begin landing. They fear that he might try to capture Duskendale to use as a landing ground for his troops. Joffrey responds by sending men out, Goldcloaks, the royal fleet, or local lords to deal with these invaders and drive them back to the Narrow. However, these moves don't amount to anything, as there is never a battle. Once the King's Landing departs, Salador Sand leaves with his loot in tow. Sir Justin orders the castle to be abandoned while their soldiers retreat into the hills. None of these succeed, nor were they meant to. Instead, they simply keep the attention of the crown as a single galley, Sir Davos's ship, lands at Cracklaw Point, accompanied by King Stannis and a contingent of his personal guard. Their goal is to rally the houses of Cracklaw to Stannis' army. They move from village to village, calling upon the scattered lords of this isolated peninsula. At each stop, Stannis speaks to the lords and small folk with his same grim determination, laying out his claim to the Iron Throne and reminding them of their sworn oaths to Dragonstone. Fortunately, Sir Davos proves far more personable and skilled in reading men. With his council, Stannis also sits down and listens, hearing their petitions and grievances, no matter how small. At first, the lords are wary, their loyalty dulled by years of neglect from Dragonstone and exploitation by Lord Celtigar. Yet Stannis' reputation for fairness and the quiet sincerity of Davos's words begin to chip away with their distrust. Stannis insists on hearing their disputes, whether over fishing rights or quarrels with Celtigar's tax collectors. With each judgment, he dispenses justice, no matter how small or tedious the matter seems to others. He promises them autonomy under his reign, to the self-governance that their ancestors had once enjoyed under the Targaryens. Slowly, the Lord of Cracklaw begins to change their tune. From a barely welcomed interloper, villagers now rush to welcome him with feasts and hunting. By the time Stannis leaves Cracklaw Point, his small army has grown. Though poor, the lords of these houses pledge themselves to help however they can. They send guides to help lead him through the shortest routes to the Riverlands, and hundreds pledge themselves to his cause. By the time he reaches the edge of the peninsula, he has a small force of 1,500 men, all eager to fight, proclaiming Stannis the one true king. Before he leaves, though, he sends a raven to Roose Bolton, who is just north of Tywin's force, with a plan. He is to cross the Trident and harass Tywin Lannister's forces in the Harrenhal. With Robb now raiding west, this leaves Roose the only major northern army left to challenge him. This makes it appear as though the northern forces are preparing for an offensive. In response, brave companions and the Mountain ride forth to confront them. Battles across the fjords break out in many areas. Several places even manage to break through, forcing Tywin to focus his attention. Despite Roos's best efforts, they are unable to secure a true foothold. But this is enough, as Stannis can emerge with his small army, virtually undetected. He cuts north straight towards Maidenpool, just as his royal fleet strikes from the sea. They smash through the modest garrison of Amory Loach. Stannis himself leads the vanguard into the town, securing Maidenpool as a critical foothold for his campaign. It is not a glorious victory, but it is an effective one, as his ships deploy the rest of his army and gather the levies from House Mouton. This places over 6,000 men in his army. At the same time, Robb is riding hard west, bringing the war into the Westerlands. To everyone's surprise, he wins a string of victories, including crushing the defense forces under the command of Stafford Lannister. This throws the Lannisters in disarray, as their homeland is virtually undefended. For a moment, it seems like victory is within their reach, but soon troubles begin to arise. In the north, the Ironborn rises and strikes into Robb Stark's domain. Although he does not try to send an alliance, Balon Greyjoy sees the chaos and sends his armies out. His longships strike all across the coast, cutting off Robb from the north as they capture Moat Cailin along with capturing multiple undefended castles. While this is an inconvenience for Robb, the news of Stannis is even worse. Richard Horp sends word that Renly and his forces are starting to march out. Hearing of this success, the Southern Army begins its slow advance to King's Landing. Although the advance is slow, he has more than enough forces to capture the capital. Stannis realizes that he is in a dangerous situation. If he does not act fast, then Renly may capture King's Landing before him, putting him in a terrible position. But to reach the city, he must first deal with Tywin, who stands before him. Robb and Stannis begin exchanging ravens to try and strategize their next move. Although they are in a strong position, it is shaky, and they must act quickly. With the Ironborn invasion, the north is in danger of losing its western coast. Although they have access to the royal fleet, they are all on the eastern coast, leaving them with no strength at sea. Worst of all, having Renly capture the capital will greatly undermine Stannis' position as king, and may even convince the other lords to abandon his cause. One thing they agree on is that Tywin must be defeated to free up their forces. They decide Robb will continue to place pressure on Tywin by pressing in deeper and trying to capture the Westerlands with his current forces. Meanwhile, Stannis joins forces with Roose Bolton and sends word to Edmure Tully to further bolster their forces. Soon after, Stannis' army grows to almost 25,000 men, with more coming on the way. Richard Horp and his men will try to raid Renly's forces along with the Kingswood and delay them as long as possible. After a few days of gathering his forces, Stannis takes them and makes a sweeping push south, avoiding Harrenhal entirely and trying to rush towards the Crownlands through the lands of House Hayford. With their lands virtually undefended due to their lady being a babe and married to a Lannister, it will allow them to push deep into the capital region. Tywin rushes to intercept him, leading Stannis to move back against the Trident. Stannis chooses his ground carefully, rugged terrain to prevent the Lannisters' superior cavalry from coming into effect. His center holds firm, led by himself, clad in his unadorned black armor, a king who values substance over splendor. To his right, Roose Bolton commands his grim men of the north. On the left, Aenys Frey marshals his forces. Tywin forms his knights into an iron wall as they advance towards Stannis. Sir Adam Marbrand leads the charge, yet Stannis is prepared for this. His lines are disciplined, his archers ready to rain volleys down upon the advancing enemy, staying on the tall hills and behind hedges where the cavalry cannot run them down. By the time the cavalry arrives, their charge loses all momentum, and they batter themselves against the shield wall of the Crownlanders, stifled by a contingent of Northmen. Behind them, the Crackclaws hurl spears and fire arrows at them. The first clash is brutal, the thunder of hooves and the clash of steel echoing across the battlefield. However, the Crownlanders hold, their king rallying them with cold, steady commands. He stands in the center of the fighting with Sir Davos, their presence bolstering the soldiers' morale. On the right, Roose Bolton's forces remain methodical and steady, slowly pushing against the Lannister forces there commanded by Lord Lefford, who had advanced on foot and tried to push them back. The Lannisters are resilient, their dismounted knights refusing to yield as they advance up the hills. But this fighting is at a standstill. This is where they have the greatest success. Aenys Frey struggles to maintain cohesion, his rivermen faltering under the weight of the Lannister forces by Sir Gregor, his great sword throwing soldiers aside. Stannis sends Sir Justin Macy to redeploy, as he's given a small reserve force of cavalry. As the battle rages, small contingents of rivermen loyal to Edmund Tully trickle onto the field. These consist of a handful of men-at-arms, lesser lords, and bands of free riders. These are modest at first, and bolster Aenys Frey's crumbling position. With each new wave of men-at-arms and knights, the balance of power begins to shift subtly, turning what seemed like an inevitable Lannister victory into a grinding stalemate. Still, Tywin senses the deadlock and commits Sir Kevan with his reserves. Thousands of fresh infantry come crashing into the Baratheon lines with recoil from the strike. All around him, the contingent begins to break. But wherever the pressure shows, Stannis is there. He shouts commands, orders discipline, and rallies his men. That is until Justin Massey strikes. Rather than reinforce Sir Aenys directly, he sweeps around and strikes into the Lannister flanks. Soon after, reports come in that larger groups of rivermen are arriving, and this finally breaks the Lannister ranks. The left flank collapses and begins to crumble under the pressure. Sir Aenys sees the opportunity immediately and organizes a counterattack. They begin to push back and drive the Lannisters against their own line. Across the other fronts where Stannis holds strong, they renew their offensive too, and soon the battle shifts as panic spreads across the Lannister ranks. All across the battle, soldiers break off and retreat to their headquarters. Sensing defeat, Tywin orders a retreat, leaving Stannis with a victory. Sir Adam leads a rearguard action, allowing Tywin to retreat in good order, but with his host badly reduced. This gives Stannis control of the field and the freedom to march further south, but he secretly sends a message to the Western Lords. If they were to hand over Lord Tywin, then they would allow them to return home without ransom. For those willing to cross their banners and join him, Stannis promises to have their lands restored to them and to order Robb to leave their territories untouched. This is a tempting offer, especially as Robb rampages across their territories unchecked. Tywin tries desperately to rally his men and maintain discipline. Sir Gregor helps, murdering any soldiers he suspects of sedition. But the sting of defeat clings onto his forces, and soon a mutiny breaks out as lords and knights desert to Stannis' army, while others try to capture Tywin. Soon a small group of nobles relent and break into Tywin's tent in the middle of the night. They capture the old lion and drag him before Stannis. The remaining Lannisters fall under the command of Sir Kevan and the Mountain, but they are now no longer in a position to challenge them. The contingent is sent back to the Riverlands to ensure that the remaining Lannisters don't challenge them, while Stannis orders a forced march to King's Landing. The reports from Richard Horpe are not good, as Renly has now crossed the border of the Crownlands, and is only a little over a week's march from King's Landing. Stannis' victory was not bloodless, and even with his reinforcements, he is outnumbered almost 3-1. He sends Sir Justin and other knights to gather as many soldiers as possible from different houses in the area. The forced march to King's Landing begins under the cover of darkness, Stannis driving his wary troops hard. The already exhausted army is pushed to the brink, but Stannis does not ease up, instead riding at the head of his troops and sharing their struggles with them. Still, his victory is an important boost, as some houses send reinforcements and supplies, but none of that matters unless they capture King's Landing. With Renly only a few days away, Stannis knows he cannot launch a siege, but his troops do not have the means to storm the capital. Instead, he uses deception. He gathers some of the Westermen who defect from his army and sends them out, posing as survivors in the recent battles. They manage to get into the city and capture one of the towers in the dead of night, led by the experienced knight Sir Flemont Brax in exchange for his brother's release. They storm the tower overlooking the Mudgate. At first, he orders the Goldcloaks to be relieved by his men, claiming they shall take over. However, when this ploy fails, the knights simply rush forward and cut the garrison down. They secure the gate and begin to raise the portcullis for Stannis' forces. They rush through the city, storming the barracks and ports in a matter of seconds. Unable to resist, the soldiers yield or quickly crumble before Stannis' resistance. The city erupts into panic as Stannis' disciplined troops march through, banners of the fiery heart of R'hllor casting a grim shadow over the skyline. However, one area that manages to resist is the Red Keep. When word gets out that Stannis has breached the city, Cersei and Tyrion lock the gates and leave them under siege. Archers fire down from the battlements, and scalding oil is poured onto Stannis' troops as they attempt to scale the walls. Stannis orders his men to surround the castle, cutting off all escape routes, but he knows that time is against him. Their forces, bolstered by sellswords, are well provisioned and can last for weeks, time that Stannis cannot afford. But with their control over the rest of the city, the royal fleet arrives, including Melisandre, her crimson robes flowing like blood as she disembarks from one of the warships now anchored in Blackwater Bay.
As your men play this little game, the shadows grow darker, Your Grace. If left unchecked, it shall consume the entire realm.
That game is to seize this castle and kill the usurper. If you have a solution beyond prayers and sacrifices, I will be glad to hear it.
I shall. Tell your men to storm the castle at the hour of the wolf.
Stannis, ever pragmatic, listens to her plan. Though he harbors doubts about the sorcery she speaks of, he agrees. That night, as the moon hangs low in the sky, a shadow slips into the Red Keep, unseen by even the most vigilant guards. It moves with purpose, silent and deadly until it reaches the royal apartments. There, it strikes down Joffrey Baratheon, his screams echoing across the room. Cersei rushes in and is thrown into hysterics, entering just as the shadow monster disappears. But the image of Stannis burns in her mind. She quickly rouses the guards to search for the beast. But at that moment, Stannis and his men charge as planned. With the guards in chaos, the fighting does not last long, and the defenders' morale collapses. They quickly seize the Red Keep, but Cersei manages to slip away with the Kingsguard, leaving the capital in Stannis' hands. But that still leaves Renly to deal with. His forces arrive day's siege equipment. Fortunately, Stannis' position is far stronger than Renly's. He has access to the sea, preventing Renly from simply starving him, since Stannis has no problem receiving supplies from the Narrow Sea. Now, it is simply a waiting game. Soon after, the raids and sorties begin. To prevent their troops from falling into boredom, they both launch probing attacks into the other's defenses. Renly regularly tries to strike at the walls, searching for any weaknesses. However, this proves to be more difficult than expected, as Stannis fortifies the place well. But even this is just a distraction. While Stannis holds the capital, Robb soon rides south. With the Westerland's army under his control, no force can challenge him, so Robb leads a daring cavalry charge into the Reach, which is ripe for the picking. Though Mace remains with his substantial garrison, it is not even a contest. Robb rides circles around the older lord, dodging his forces and striking at the ripe farmlands and undermanned castles, much as the Ironborn tried with the North. The difference is that the pickings here are much greater. Several castles fall in a matter of weeks, putting immense pressure on Renly, who now faces the grim realities of war. Far from the exciting images that run through his young knight's mind, it is grim, monotonous, and ugly. Soon, some of them begin to desert, searching for more action or simply to defend their homes. Although Randyll Tarly keeps the army together for a time, this cannot last forever, and something must break, sooner or later, between the two brothers. That's our theory. If you enjoyed this and want to see it continued, like the video. If it reaches 2,500 likes, a part 2 will be made. Westeros is a land filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey across the 7 kingdoms and beyond, then please like, share, and subscribe to our channel.